Hello. Today we're going to be learning about the alchemical secrets hiding in the story of Santa Claus. This is going to be an astrophysiological presentation on the mysteries of Santa Claus, and the story of Santa Claus being the story of the man who comes down the chimney bringing gifts, leaving them under the tree, rising back up, and flying on 7 reindeer, to be a symbolic representation of biochemical and physiological occurrences that happen within the human body that are allegorized. This has been exposed by George W. Carey, who wrote God, Man, Word Made Flesh, as well as Manly P. Hall. And today we're going to read a little bit out of George W. Carey, God, Man, Word Made Flesh, the chapter called Santa Claus, just to get a foundation for the presentation ahead. So here it starts. Santa Claus. All down the ages, there have been stories of fairies, gnomes, mermaids, naiads, and fabled characters galore. The ancient Norsemen, Dutch, Huns, and all the Oriental races possessed literature prolific with allegories, parables, and fables built around the wonders and physical and chemical operations of the human body. The birth of the monthly seed is the basis of the Mother Goose stories and similar tales in all lands. Santa Claus, or Saint Nicholas, the patron saint of Sephar's virgins and children, is the bearer of gifts to children on Christmas Eve. Of all festivals celebrated all over the known world, that held in the honor of Santa Claus ranks first in the hearts of all humanity, old as well as young. This in itself is a most significant fact. It is time that the truth in regard to this age-long custom be made known to the world, time that its real and true significance be understood. Then will it be truly celebrated, for it will have become an inward process as well as an outward observation. This is where George W. Carey is explaining how not only is this something that happens within ourselves on a hormonal alchemical level, it is also an occurrence that we can observe that happens in nature, astronomically, anagogically. As we talked about in the previous lectures, the different allegories pertaining to different characters. This is how the ancients relayed information about the invisible world, the world of archetypes, and we relate to the Hermetic principle as within, so without, and the doctrine of analogies, which means that like is similar to like. That things are analogous, things are the same, above as below. We have the same shapes that occur in nature and sacred geometry. We build the temples based off the human body. The first temple that was made was based on the structure of the human body. So all of these things are pre-existing archetypes, including the story of Santa Claus. So he goes on to say, it is time for this age-long custom to be made known to the world, time that its real and true significance be understood. Then will it be truly celebrated, for it will become an inward process as well as an outward observation. Parents from time immemorial have explained to their children that the presents which they found in their stockings, when they jumped eagerly from their beds in the morning, were placed there by a mysterious person called Santa Claus. No one once saw him come, no one once saw him leave, but he left unmistakable evidence of his visit. Some children may ask questions in regard to this mysterious person, and when they become too insistent, and ingenuity of the parents is sorely taxed to give satisfactory answers. There comes a time, however, where they must have the Santa Claus myth explained to them. And this, in ancient times, we were able to transmit this knowledge to the children through these alchemical representations of the story. And then when they came of age, they would understand the true meaning of it. So this is where he proves that there is a Santa Claus. Santa Claus is real because Santa Claus is a physiological fact, and it does secrete the most holy and wonderful gift or substance in the body of every individual. Those who understand it, who receive it in the right spirit, have become as little children. As above, so below. As in the macrocosm, the universe, so in the microcosm, man. Can anyone think for one moment that the parables, fables, allegories, and myths that have come down to us through the ages have no basic foundation? They, as well as the fast days and feast days, are founded on great esoteric truths. Otherwise, they would have ceased to be. Santa Claus, or Saint Claus, is derived from the same root word, claustrum, from which a cloister is also derived. Claustrum means a barrier or a covered place. cloister is referred to as a place of seclusion. As we can see, the putamen is connected to where the claustrum is the sled that Santa Claus rides in. We can see that it's shaped in the same way a sled would be shaped. And within this aspect of the body, on top is the hat, or the putamen, shaped like Santa's hat, which secretes the oil or the gifts that descend down the spinal column and responsible for nourishing the nervous system, as well as producing the hormones to produce the sexual fluids. The gland in the brain resembles characteristics from the story of Santa Claus, as you can tell by the hat. Santa wears a hat that resembles this gland in the brain. And we're told that Santa lives in the North Pole with the white snow. Well, that's the white matter of the brain, the white matter in the north, because the north is considered the head on top of the body pointing north. So we can see all the physiological aspects of the story in the body, including the reindeer, the sled, the hat. The gift is placed down the chimney, which relates to the spinal column. The spinal column is the chimney that Santa, or the claustrum in the brain that we have here, the claustrum, secretes oil or the fluids down the spinal column, which is the chimney, and they go down to the bottom, which form the gifts, and rise back up. And the process in the east is called the Kundalini, the energy, the descending and ascending pathways of the energy of the human body. There's a St. Claus or claustrum within the cerebrum, and whoever gave it that name knew why they did so. The suture of the skull is the point where the bones meet. We can rarely see this place on the head of infants, as the secretions are not then drawn closely together, and the vibrations of the brain can be seen and felt. In Sanskrit, it is called the door of Brahman, for it is the acupuncture which the ego or spirit leaves the body. It is also the chimney of Santa Claus. The vertebrae as a whole is called the stick of Brahman. Directly underneath the door of Brahman is the triangular-shaped body named in physiology the island of Rael. This is the place where John was when he looked back and saw the wonderful vision of the regenerated man in the Isle of Patmos. This island is the central lobe of the cerebrum and is called the pole. Hence, the island of Re is the north pole of the body, and it, as well as we know, the imperishable sacred land. In Santi's anatomy of the brain and the spinal cord, we find that this island is situated in the medial wall of the lateral fissure of the cerebrum between the frontal and parietal temporal lobes, whose growth after the 5th month in utero gradually covers it over. At the end of the first year of extraneous life, it is entirely concealed by temporal, partial, and frontal parts of the operculum, cover or lid. Thus, we see that Mother Nature has taken great pains to conceal the sacred center. Underneath the island and directly in line with the optic thalamus lies the claustrum, but separated from it by yet 3 other bodies. The claustrum is a thin sheet of isolated gray matter found just medial to the island of Rel. Santi says it is a sheet of peculiar gray substance and is made up of spindle-shaped cell bodies. It is from this claustrum that contains yellow substance within its outer grayish exterior that the wonderful priceless oil is formed that flows down into the olivary fasciculus, descending from the rubrospinal tract through the retrocular formation in the pons and medulla to the lateral column of the spinal column. It terminates in the gray matter of the spinal cord, probably giving off collaterals to the corresponding nuclei in the brainstem. This is the oil of the precious gift of which the Bible speaks of. So essentially, the brain is a laboratory where Santa Claus and his elves on the North Pole produce a heavenly-like substance, where in the Eastern tradition, or in the Christian tradition, it's the manna from heaven, or the oil of gladness. In Eastern tradition, it's the amnita, the land flowing with milk and honey, that the promised land where Moses leads the people in bondage to the promised land flowing with milk and honey. Well, this is also in the story of Santa Claus, because Santa Claus and the elves create the fluids in the claustrum, which produce the oil that flows down the chimney or the spinal column. So the oil of gladness in the Bible is what allows us to regenerate our talents, our gifts, and our qualities that are gifted to us by the Creator. So the gifts are the oils at the bottom of the spine that create the sexual energy that allow us to reproduce, and not only reproduce children, but reproduce soul-like talents and qualities and even bodies within ourselves, because this all relates to the ancient science of yoga, or theurgy, which means to make the human body, to interact in the human body in such a way that it becomes a perfect reservoir of energy and is balanced in a way that, because it's following the purpose of the reason why it was created, because someone who uses the body correctly allows this process to take place. That's why Santa has a naughty and nice list, because the naughty list are ones who waste the oil and don't have any gifts left at the bottom to rise back up the chimney or the spinal column, activating the 7 chakras. And we can see here's the sled, the claustrum. Here's where George W. Carey says the oil flows down into the spine, down to the bottom and back up. So this is the chimney. And at the bottom of the chimney, we have fire, because the fire, just as in the Eastern Taoist tradition, we have the bottom cauldron. The cauldron is where the energy is cooked and retained, and that heat rises the mercury in the spiritual thermometer, the spinal column, which rises all the way up the chimney into the brain, activating the sled or the reindeer, aka astral projection, to be able to have higher consciousness. The elves are the neurons that produce the hormones that are secreted down the chimney, those 2 fluids that George W. Carey spoke of that are produced in the laboratory of the brain. They're the fluids that are secreted down the nervous system and feed the whole nervous system and produce the sexual energy, which is used to allow the seed, which is deposited within the solar plexus, which is the gift of life, or the bread of life, the ability for man to regenerate himself on a spiritual and physical and mental level. So the elves are in the North Pole because the brain is considered north in occult anatomy, and the elves are all the neurons and cells that come together to produce this under the order of the claustrum, which is the gland that secretes it. And the sled and the 7 reindeer are symbolic of the astral projection or shamanic dreaming that occurs when this process takes place, because when the oils rise in meditation and righteous living and following the commandments of the Creator, we're able to unlock these inner talents, which are represented by the 7 flying reindeer, which are the 7 planets, the 7 chakras in the human body. Santa leaves the holy fluid for the gifts when risen back up, produce the DMT-like effects within the brain. The brain's a holy laboratory. And he takes off, meaning astral projection, out-of-body experiences, to have effects that allow one to have full conscious access to the astral plane. So when we follow the Santa Claus, and especially in wintertime during the winter solstice, this energy is more abundant. We have more Christ oil produced in our nervous system around this time, because the sun is weakened and gives us its energy that it sacrifices, its energy, and it rises within ourselves. And when we retain this oil, this fluid rises up at the chimney, up into the brain, back to the North Pole, to produce more gifts, more talents, more abilities. Or what's better to say is more love for God, more love for your neighbor, to have more love, to have a nervous system that's being replenished by the gifts rather than a lump of coal, because that's when, the fluids descend and then descend even more through emission of the sexual energy, which doesn't allow the energy to rise back up into the brain properly. This is why white tantra is so important. I recommend the Yellow Book by Samael Weor, and that there's lots of different places that you can gain the knowledge of the esoteric rising the Kundalini. So we have the symbolism of the Christmas tree, which represent the 7 planets and the 7 chakras. And the fruit or the sephiroth of the tree are the ornaments on the tree. So we have the sephiroth, which are the fruits or the lights that we decorate our Christmas tree. and these relate to the 7 chakras. And then also, this tree of life represents the nervous system, which is lit up with the Kundalini energy, because we retain the fire of the chimney, and we're holding in our sexual potency and using it to transform it into higher states of consciousness. The tree is lit up and light shines within the body. That's why Santa Claus is always seen with the lantern. And we always see him with his lantern, the lantern of wisdom, the hermit, someone who's taken to yogic discipline, someone who is going through a transformation, is a Saint Nicholas. The archetype of Saint Nicholas allows us to tap into our physiology and to awaken our inner latent talents and gifts that are laying dormant within our soul, that are activated by rising the gifts and the fluids back up into the brain through the science of Kundalini, which is practiced in all of the traditions, which is the core of, in the same story of Moses being raising the serpent on the staff. We would have these beautiful Masonic tales like Santa Claus that tell us how this process happens within the body on an allegorical level that's easy to digest. The candy cane and the shepherd's staff, as we know that this is in the shape of the spinal column. And when the energy rises in the spine, it has to come up and around and meet right here to the midpoint of our eyebrows, where we focus our gaze ever so slightly in between our eyebrows, which is, as he put, this is the door of Brahman, the seat of Brahman, tongue at the roof of the mouth, eyes slightly open, right here, with the Mona Lisa slightly smiling, like Mona Lisa, allowing the energy to flow up and around, which is the shepherd's crook. And the easiest way to transmute the instinctual energy, that is the fire of the Kundalini, that needs to rise up the staff, which is the chimney, which relates to Santa Claus, which is the oil, the gifts that flow down the spinal column and start to occur in the sexual organs of man and woman, in order to be transmuted back up from whence they came, the cerebrum. See, the claustrum or Santa Claus produces a fluid that is differentiated and deposited in the pineal gland and pituitary gland. These are the alchemical laboratories, and pineal produces a yellow substance and the pituitary produces a white substance. This is known as the milk and honey of the alchemist. These fluids descend down Ida and Pingala down to the base of the spine, and these are the gifts that Santa Claus leaves down the chimney. This happens on a monthly basis, but on Christmas, on December 21st, the solstice, this is allegorically and anagogically much increased. Much more importance is attended in this time of the season, because the doctrine of analogy, or as above so below, we stay in sync with the universe. What's going on outside is going on inside. They're a reflection of each other. Just what we can gain from this is that Santa Claus is a representation of the alchemical physiological transmutation of the sexual energy within the body to allow the human being to reach a state of purity and to allow it to regain its lost state by understanding the mysteries of transmutation of the animal nature into human nature, and able to awaken the inner gifts within. So the mysteries of Santa Claus is a great syncretic symbolical story that merges the aspects of Christianity of the West and the Kundalini science of the Indus Valley, and allows them to come together in a very unique way. So we continue here. George W. Carey mentions the claustrum is a thin sheet of isolated gray matter found just medial to the island of Raleigh. Not only is there oil manufactured within this special laboratory of the brain, but there is actually an olive tree which bears actual olives, so named in any anatomy. The 2 olives are the 2 infinitesimal eminences on either side of the medulla, with the pyramid between. They are 1/2 inch in length. It is found well developed only in higher mammals. They are relay stations between the cerebrum and the cerebellum, and between the spinal cord and the cerebellum. The oil is the most sacred substance of the body. It is the quintessence of gold, or the gold of Ophir, most truly a rare gift. Globules of oil are found in the vital fluid, the semen, And when the prodigal son has wasted his substance, he finds that it takes a long time to replace the deficiency and make good the looted bank account. This wonderful oil is the secret work of the Immaculate Virgin Mary, or Mare, represented by the sign Virgo. In chemistry, we find the sulfate of potassium is the mineral salt, which uniting with sulfur and oxygen manufactures the oil. We find that this salt also crystallizes out of the mother liquors of seawater and salt springs. People born under the sign of Virgo, if they have become deficient in this salt, suffer from dryness of the skin and baldness. We can also understand why draining of the vital fluid, living in excesses, will also produce baldness. If there was no oil in the body, the skin should become harsh and dry. So now we have the mystery of Santa Claus, why he always has a full beard and full head of hair, because he's showing his energy, the potency of allowing the energy to rise into the spinal column, producing this white pure hair and beard as a symbol of saving the oil, essentially. The story of the wise virgins who had their lamps trimmed and filled with oil is given to emphasize the necessity for the presence of oil in the body, for they cannot go out to meet the bridegroom unless their lamps are burning. So you have to be burning with the sexual fire by restraining the sexual fluids, and by restraining the sexual fluids while still practicing white tantra or having sexual relationship with your partner, you're able to retain the fire, and the energy rises up and down the chimney, leaving the gifts and awakening the inner talents of the chakra system, which relates to the tree of life. The 7 chakras, the ornaments of the tree. The nervous system becomes lit up with these gifts. Humanity now is functioning on a level where their nervous systems are shutting down. There's no light in the lamp, and the trees are essentially not lit within, and there's no inner light because we're in a stage of darkness, because we have not been given the knowledge of how to use the body as an alchemical laboratory that the creator intended it to be. So people says here, this Santa Claus gives the light to the whole house, the perpetual lamp. The lamb is the lamp. There are the olives which contain the oil, or the reservoirs, the relay stations, of course, which furnish the oil for the lamp, the pineal gland, at the top of which is the flame or eye. When the Kundalini, the serpent fire that lies concealed within the sacral plexus, is awakened, burns up the dross within the spinal cord, and reaches the cranium, it sets fire to this oil, and thus lights the perpetual lamp, which gives the light to the whole house. Santa Claus is thus the giver of the supreme gift in the human body, the oil for the perpetual lamp, the gold of Ophir, and the quintessence of richness. A total lack of oil in the body will in itself cause death. Santa Claus brings its gifts when the Christmas is celebrated. The Greek characters that stand for Christ are XPI, and the word Christ means oil in Greek. The seed is the bread of life, and when anointed with oil, christed and crucified, becomes the Christ Mass, the bread eaten in the Father's kingdom. Thus we know clearly understand the meaning of Santa Claus and his Christmas visits with the gifts to the children. So as we can see, the story of Santa Claus is an alchemical journey of the energy that flows within the central nervous system of the human body and how it relates to astrophysiological, psychophysiological regeneration. The point of this is to regenerate humanity to its previous state before we became degenerated. Our nervous systems have been degenerated by disobeying natural law and the laws of the creator that teach us how to use the body correctly. So we have Santa Claus's hat. We have the claustrum that produces the oil flowing down the spine, the chimney, going down the 33 vertebrae. And as it descends, the gifts are left. And when this ascends back up every month, if kept, new gifts, new talents, and new beautiful latent qualities are birthed from within you that are already there from the creator. But these are how it nourishes your tree. So this is why, Jesus says, and you can tell a tree by its fruits. So the nervous system produces the fruits when the oil's kept. We have the sled, claustrum, the little elves representing the gnomes in the Western esoteric tradition. The gnomes are resembled of the earth element, and they tend to the whole cellular level of the body. and help us on an interdimensional level to produce these chemicals or hormones, to produce the chemical laboratory correctly, because the chemistry of the body, or the fluids, the water, is a subtle effulgence of the invisible realm, and the invisible realm connects to the physical body through the fluids of the body. And then air is what helps the spirit combine into the air, and the air is used as a medium between the spirit, the mind, and the chemistry, the fluids of the body, and those fluids of the body connect to the physical body. So we go from subtle to gross, from subtle to dense. And by keeping this fluid within, our nervous system is regenerated, and we awaken our pineal gland, allowing us to have astral projection and becoming awakened in the astral plane. So this is some of the mysteries of the alchemical journey of Santa Claus and how it relates to us. So we can see here the Great Arcanum, or the Great Work, of which this is a symbolic story that represents the great work, is as simple as blooming of a flower. So in the same way a flower goes through stages of growth and finally blossoms, in the same way this similar process takes place within our bodies on a chemical level. So the story of Santa Claus is symbolic of the hormonal chemical process. This procedure, as George W. Carey states, is automatic, which, if not interfered with, will do away with sickness, trouble, sorrow, death. As stated in the Bible, it is referred to as the oil of gladness. Now, in the age of Aquarius, this knowledge has been given out by people like George W. Carey, Manly P. Hall, Samael Mayor, Swami Vivekananda, who have all explained the science of Kundalini Tantra, allowing yourself to rise the Kundalini and activate the 12 cranial nerves, which nourishes and produces the reactivation of the 13th cranial nerve. And this is through chastity, which doesn't necessarily mean abstinence. So if you're married, you can still have the coitus, or the sexual connection, without losing chastity, simply by retaining the sexual fluids. These fluids are the fluids that are produced through the hormonal alchemical laboratory of the claustrum. And as you can see, the brain resembles the actual characteristics of the story of Santa Claus, as we're told that Santa Claus lives in the North Pole, where it's snow, relating to the white matter of the brain. Because the reason why is because life is essentially full of mystical mysteries, and one of them being the human body itself. So the stories we write are always reflecting the inner workings of nature, similar to the menstrual cycle of like women. Men also have this cycle within, and similar to women, as the seed is born and retained within the body. So as we can see, the gifts that Santa brings down the chimney, we rise these fluids back up to the brain through living in accordance with the natural laws that govern our bodies. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed this presentation on Santa Claus, and thank you so much.